In a world where first impressions can make or break careers, imagine being the person everyone overlooks. Picture walking into a room where your uniform is perfectly pressed, your posture is military straight, but your voice barely rises above a whisper. Now imagine that same quiet voice holding the key to saving lives, preventing international disasters, and changing the course of military history. This is the story of how one moment of unexpected revelation transformed not just one soldier's destiny, but challenged everything the military thought they knew about hidden talent. Sometimes the most powerful weapons aren't the ones that make the loudest noise, sometimes they're found in the quiet corners, waiting for the right moment to change everything. What happens when the person you've been ignoring turns out to be exactly what you've been desperately searching for? The answer will leave you questioning everything you think you know about judging people by their cover. The morning sun cast long shadows across Fort Brennan as Private Sarah Chen stepped off the transport bus with 23 other new recruits. Her duffel bag hung loosely from her shoulder, and her eyes stayed fixed on the ground as drill sergeants barked orders that echoed across the concrete. While her fellow soldiers responded with loud acknowledgments and nervous energy, Sarah simply nodded and followed directions without saying a word. Colonel Rebecca Martinez watched from her office window on the third floor of the administration building. She had been reviewing personnel files all morning, preparing for the quarterly briefing that would determine which recruits would advance to specialized training programs. The stack of folders on her desk represented months of careful selection, but as she looked down at the new arrivals, she wondered if any of them possessed the unique skills her department desperately needed. The intelligence division had been struggling with a critical shortage. Recent global tensions had created an urgent demand for soldiers who could navigate complex international situations, but finding the right candidates had proven nearly impossible. The colonel needed someone with exceptional language abilities, cultural sensitivity, and the mental agility to adapt quickly to changing circumstances. So far, every candidate had fallen short of these demanding requirements. Down in the courtyard, Sarah moved through the orientation process with quiet efficiency. When Drill Sergeant Thompson called for introductions, each recruit stood and announced their name, hometown, and reasons for joining the military. The responses were predictably enthusiastic, filled with declarations about serving their country and seeking adventure. When Sarah's turn came, she stood slowly and spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. Private Sarah Chen, Seattle, Washington. I joined to serve. Her words were simple and direct, without the dramatic flair that characterized the other introductions. Some recruits glanced at each other with barely concealed smirks, already forming opinions about the quiet girl who seemed afraid of her own shadow. What they didn't know was that Sarah's quietness came from years of listening more than speaking. Growing up in a diverse neighborhood, she had absorbed languages like a sponge absorbs water. Her grandmother spoke Mandarin at home, her neighbors conversed in Spanish, and her best friend's family had taught her basic Arabic during countless dinner invitations. College had added French and German to her repertoire, while a study abroad program had given her conversational skills in Russian and Portuguese. But Sarah had learned early that her linguistic abilities often made others uncomfortable. In high school, teachers had sometimes accused her of showing off when she offered to translate for new students. In college, classmates had made jokes about her being a walking Google Translate. She had learned to keep her abilities to herself, speaking only when necessary and never volunteering information about her unusual skills. The first few weeks of basic training reinforced this habit. Sarah excelled at physical requirements and followed orders perfectly, but she remained virtually invisible among her more outspoken peers. During mealtimes, she sat quietly and listened to conversations flowing around her. When other recruits complained about difficult assignments, she completed hers without comment. When training exercises challenged the group, she participated effectively but never drew attention to her contributions. Drill Sergeant Thompson began to notice Sarah's consistent performance, though he initially interpreted her quietness as lack of confidence. He had seen countless recruits over his 15-year career, and he knew the difference between shyness and incompetence. Sarah clearly belonged in the former category, but he wondered if military service was the right fit for someone who seemed uncomfortable with attention. The breakthrough moment came during a routine equipment inspection. A group of international observers had arrived at Fort Brennan as part of a military exchange program. The delegation included officers from Germany, France, Spain, and China, all participating in a joint training initiative designed to strengthen international cooperation. Their visit was supposed to be straightforward, with predetermined schedules and carefully planned interactions. However, complications arose when the German officer, Major Klaus Weber, became separated from his translator during a facility tour. He found himself in the equipment bay where Sarah's unit was conducting inventory checks, and he began asking questions in heavily accented English that the supervising sergeant couldn't quite understand. The situation became increasingly frustrating as communication broke down, and the Major's questions about specific equipment specifications couldn't be answered properly. Sarah had been organizing supplies in the corner when she heard the conversation deteriorating. She recognized the Major's growing frustration and could hear him occasionally muttering in German under his breath. Her first instinct was to continue with her assigned tasks and let the situation resolve itself, but something about the Major's demeanor suggested this was more than casual curiosity about military equipment. The supervising sergeant was becoming visibly stressed, knowing that international relations could be affected by seemingly minor miscommunications. He was trying to contact someone from the liaison office when Sarah made a decision that would change everything. She set down her clipboard and approached the group with her characteristic quiet confidence. "Entschuldigen Sie, Herr Major," she said softly in fluent German. "Kann ich Ihnen helfen?" The effect was immediate and dramatic. Major Weber's face transformed with relief and surprise as he realized he could communicate in his native language. The supervising sergeant stared at Sarah with a combination of shock and gratitude. Within minutes, Sarah was smoothly translating technical specifications, answering complex questions about equipment capabilities, and facilitating a conversation that had seemed impossible moments earlier. But the surprises weren't finished. As the tour continued, the French liaison officer, Captain Marie Dubois, joined the group with questions of her own. Without hesitation, Sarah switched to French, maintaining the same level of fluency and technical accuracy. When the Spanish observer needed clarification about training protocols, Sarah seamlessly transitioned to Spanish. The international delegation began looking at this quiet American soldier with newfound respect and curiosity. The most dramatic moment came when the Chinese observer, Lieutenant Colonel Wang, asked a question that stumped the accompanying translator. The question involved nuanced military terminology that required deep understanding of both languages and military culture. Sarah listened carefully, then responded in fluent Mandarin that not only answered the question but demonstrated sophisticated understanding of Chinese military concepts. Word of the incident spread quickly through the base communication network. Within hours, reports had reached Colonel Martinez's desk about a recruit who had single-handedly rescued a potentially embarrassing international situation through extraordinary language skills. The colonel's initial reaction was skepticism, but multiple witnesses confirmed the account, and the international observers themselves had specifically requested information about the remarkable young soldier. That evening, Colonel Martinez reviewed Sarah's personnel file with fresh eyes. The standard military application revealed nothing about language abilities beyond the usual high school foreign language requirements. Sarah's academic records showed strong performance but no obvious indicators of the extraordinary skills that had been demonstrated that afternoon. The colonel realized that their recruitment and evaluation processes had completely missed identifying one of the most valuable assets to arrive at Fort Brennan in years. The implications were staggering. The intelligence division had been searching for exactly this type of capability for months, spending considerable resources trying to identify and recruit candidates with advanced language skills. Meanwhile, the perfect candidate had been quietly completing basic training assignments without anyone recognizing her potential value. Colonel Martinez decided to investigate further. She contacted Sarah's previous supervisors and discovered a pattern of consistent excellence combined with remarkable humility. Every report mentioned Sarah's reliability and competence, but none had identified her linguistic capabilities because no one had thought to ask, and Sarah had never volunteered the information. The colonel also reached out to the international observers to get their assessment of Sarah's abilities. Their feedback was unanimous and enthusiastic. Major Weber reported that Sarah's German was not only fluent but demonstrated sophisticated understanding of military culture and terminology. Captain Du Bois noted that Sarah's French included technical vocabulary that suggested extensive study or immersion experience. The Chinese observer was particularly impressed, stating that Sarah's Mandarin reflected deep cultural understanding that went far beyond basic language instruction. As Colonel Martinez prepared for what would become a career-defining decision, she reflected on the broader implications of the situation. How many other exceptional individuals were currently overlooked by conventional evaluation methods? How many critical capabilities were being wasted because the military's recruitment processes failed to identify non-obvious talents? Sarah's case suggested that the entire approach to identifying and developing human resources needed fundamental reconsideration. The colonel's next move would not only change Sarah's military trajectory but would also force the entire command structure to question their assumptions about talent identification and development. Sometimes the most important discoveries come from the most unexpected places, and sometimes the quietest voices carry the most powerful messages. Sarah, meanwhile, was completely unaware of the attention her actions had generated. She had simply seen a problem that needed solving and had used her available skills to help. In her mind, she had done nothing more than any competent soldier should do when faced with a communication challenge. The idea that her quiet intervention had set in motion a series of events that would reshape her entire future never occurred to her. The stage was set for a confrontation between traditional military thinking and the recognition that exceptional talent often comes in unexpected packages. What would happen next would challenge everyone involved to reconsider their understanding of leadership, capability, and the true meaning of military service. The following morning brought an unusual summons that would forever alter the trajectory of Sarah Chen's military career. She was completing her regular physical training when Drill Sergeant Thompson approached with an expression she had never seen before. Instead of his usual commanding bark, he spoke with something approaching reverence. "Private Chen, you're wanted in Building C, Room 301. Colonel Martinez wants to see you immediately." The other recruits stopped their exercises to stare. Being called to see a colonel during basic training was unprecedented, and speculation began immediately about what Sarah might have done wrong. Sarah's mind raced through possibilities as she quickly changed into her dress uniform. She had been meticulous about following regulations, and yesterday's incident with the international visitors had seemed routine to her. The walk to the administration building felt longer than usual, with each step increasing her anxiety about the unknown situation awaiting her. Colonel Martinez had spent most of the night researching Sarah's background and developing a strategy for the conversation ahead. She understood that approaching someone with Sarah's apparent personality required careful consideration. Direct confrontation or overwhelming praise might cause Sarah to retreat further into her shell, potentially wasting the extraordinary opportunity that had presented itself. When Sarah knocked on the office door, the colonel was struck by how small and unassuming she appeared. The personnel file had listed her height and weight, but seeing her in person reinforced how easy it would be to overlook such a person in a crowd. Yet this seemingly ordinary soldier possessed capabilities that could reshape the entire intelligence division's effectiveness. "Please sit down, Private Chen," Colonel Martinez said, gesturing to a chair across from her desk. "I want to discuss yesterday's incident with our international visitors." Sarah's heart sank. She had been replaying the events, wondering if she had somehow overstepped her authority by speaking directly to foreign officers. Military protocol was complex, and she worried that her desire to help had created unintended complications. "Ma'am, if I did something wrong, I apologize. I only wanted to help with the communication problem." The colonel studied Sarah's expression, noting the genuine concern and complete absence of pride or self-promotion. This confirmed her growing understanding that Sarah's abilities were coupled with remarkable humility, a combination that was both refreshing and challenging in a military context where self-advocacy was often necessary for career advancement. "Private Chen, you're not in trouble. In fact, quite the opposite. I need to understand exactly what happened yesterday, and, more importantly, I need to know about your language abilities." Relief flooded Sarah's features, followed quickly by wariness. She had learned to be cautious about discussing her linguistic skills, having experienced everything from skepticism to resentment throughout her life. Even well-meaning people sometimes made her feel like a curiosity rather than a person. I speak some languages, ma'am. Yesterday, the officers seemed to need help communicating, so I offered to translate. Some languages? Colonel Martinez leaned forward. Private Chen, Major Weber reported that your German was flawless. Captain Dubois said your French included technical military terminology she rarely hears from native speakers. Lieutenant Colonel Wan was so impressed with your Mandarin that he asked specifically about your background. These don't sound like some languages to me. Sarah remained silent for a moment, processing the realization that her actions had been reported at the highest levels. She had never intended to draw such attention, and the implications were overwhelming. How many languages do you actually speak, Private Chen? 7, ma'am. Though my abilities vary depending on the language and context. The colonel's carefully maintained professional demeanor nearly cracked. 7 languages represented more linguistic capability than the entire intelligence division possessed among its current personnel. The strategic value was almost incalculable, particularly given the current global situation. Tell me about your background. How did you acquire these skills? Sarah began to relax slightly as she realized the colonel's interest was professional rather than skeptical. She explained her multicultural upbringing, her academic experiences, and her natural aptitude for languages. As she spoke, Colonel Martinez began to understand the depth of Sarah's capabilities and the remarkable circumstances that had brought such talent into their midst. Private Chen, what you accomplished yesterday went far beyond basic translation. You demonstrated cultural competence, technical knowledge, and diplomatic sensitivity that our specialized personnel train for years to develop. Where did you learn military terminology in these languages? Sarah's answer revealed another layer of her exceptional preparation. During college, she had worked as a freelance translator for various organizations, including some military contractors. She had deliberately studied technical vocabularies because accurate translation required understanding context and specialized terminology. What had started as professional development had inadvertently prepared her for exactly the situation she had encountered yesterday. The conversation continued for over an hour as Colonel Martinez probed the extent of Sarah's abilities and began to formulate plans for utilizing such extraordinary talent. She learned that Sarah's language skills were supported by deep cultural understanding, historical knowledge, and intuitive grasp of international relations that would be invaluable in intelligence operations. Private Chen, I'm going to be direct with you. The intelligence division has been searching for someone with exactly your capabilities for months. We have critical positions that require advanced language skills, cultural competence, and the ability to adapt quickly to changing international situations. Are you interested in specialized assignment? Sarah was stunned. The possibility of using her language skills in military service had never occurred to her. She had joined the military for stable employment and opportunities for advancement, never imagining that her personal interests could become professional assets. Ma'am, I'm honored by your confidence, but I'm not sure I'm qualified for intelligence work. I'm just a private who happens to speak some languages. Colonel Martinez recognized the self-doubt that was preventing Sarah from recognizing her own value. This was exactly the kind of thinking that had allowed such exceptional talent to remain hidden during the recruitment process. Private Chen, qualification isn't just about formal training or previous experience. It's about capability, intelligence, and character. Yesterday, you demonstrated all 3 under pressure. The question is whether you're willing to develop these abilities further in service to your country. The weight of the decision was enormous. Sarah had always preferred working behind the scenes, avoiding attention and responsibility that came with high-profile assignments. Intelligence work would require exactly the kind of visibility she had spent her life avoiding. But something in Colonel Martinez's manner suggested this was about more than career advancement. The colonel spoke about critical needs and national security implications that made Sarah's personal comfort seem less important than her potential contribution to something larger than herself. What would this assignment involve, ma'am? Colonel Martinez outlined the intelligence division's mission and the specific roles that required advanced language capabilities. She explained how Sarah's skills could be developed through specialized training and how her unique background would provide advantages that couldn't be taught to other candidates. The conversation revealed the extent to which the military's current capabilities were limited by language barriers and cultural misunderstandings. Recent international incidents had highlighted these weaknesses, creating urgent demand for personnel who could navigate complex cross-cultural situations effectively. "I need to think about this, ma'am." "Of course. But, Private Chen, opportunities like this don't come along often, and the military's need for your capabilities is immediate. I can give you 24 hours to consider, but I need an answer quickly." As Sarah left the colonel's office, her mind was reeling with possibilities she had never considered. The quiet, unassuming life she had planned was being replaced by visions of international assignments, critical missions, and responsibilities that seemed far beyond her experience and comfort level. That evening, she called her grandmother, the woman who had first introduced her to the beauty of language and cultural exchange. Without revealing specifics about the military opportunity, Sarah described her dilemma about whether to accept a challenging assignment that would require using her language skills professionally. Her grandmother's response was immediate and clear: languages are gifts meant to build bridges between people. If you have the chance to use your gifts to help others understand each other, you must take it. The world needs more bridge builders, not more people who hide their light under a basket. The conversation crystallized Sarah's decision. She had spent too much of her life minimizing her abilities to make others comfortable. Perhaps it was time to embrace what made her unique and find out what she could accomplish when she stopped holding herself back. The next morning, Sarah knocked on Colonel Martinez's door with a new sense of purpose. The quiet recruit who had stumbled into an extraordinary opportunity was about to become someone entirely different, though neither she nor the colonel could have predicted just how dramatic that transformation would be. "Ma'am, I've made my decision. I want to accept the intelligence assignment." Colonel Martinez smiled, knowing that this moment would mark the beginning of one of the most remarkable careers the intelligence division had ever witnessed. What she couldn't have anticipated was how Sarah's unique approach to intelligence work would soon challenge every assumption about how military operations should be conducted. 3 weeks later, Sarah found herself in a world she never could have imagined existed. The Intelligence Division's training facility looked nothing like the standard military installations she had grown accustomed to during basic training. Instead of barracks and parade grounds, the complex featured conference rooms with sophisticated communication equipment, language labs with cutting-edge technology, and briefing chambers where world maps covered entire walls. Her new teammates were unlike any soldiers she had previously encountered. Captain David Rodriguez had spent 5 years in military intelligence, specializing in Middle Eastern affairs. Lieutenant Jennifer Walsh was a former State Department translator who had joined the military after completing graduate studies in international relations. Sergeant First Class Michael Thompson brought 15 years of field experience from assignments across Europe and Asia. What struck Sarah most profoundly was how differently she was treated in this environment. Instead of being the quiet recruit who blended into the background, she suddenly found herself valued for the very qualities that had previously made her feel out of place. Her linguistic abilities weren't curiosities to be hidden but professional tools to be developed and deployed strategically. The training program designed specifically for Sarah's development was unlike anything the Intelligence Division had previously implemented. Colonel Martinez had worked with specialized consultants to create a curriculum that would transform Sarah's natural abilities into sophisticated intelligence capabilities while accommodating her introverted personality and preference for behind-the-scenes work. Days began with intensive briefings on current international situations. Sarah learned to analyze foreign news sources in their original languages, identifying nuances and cultural contexts that often escaped translation. She discovered that her ability to read between the lines in multiple languages provided insights that even experienced analysts sometimes missed. The technological component of her training was equally revolutionary. The division introduced her to advanced communication systems that allowed real-time translation and cultural consultation during field operations. Sarah learned to operate equipment that could connect her instantly with military personnel anywhere in the world, providing linguistic and cultural support for critical missions. But the most challenging aspect of her training involved developing confidence in high-pressure situations. Sarah's natural tendency was to observe and analyze before speaking, which served her well in many contexts but could be problematic when immediate decisions were required. Colonel Martinez assigned Lieutenant Walsh as Sarah's mentor, specifically to help her develop the assertiveness needed for intelligence work. "Sarah, your insights are worthless if you don't share them," Lieutenant Walsh explained during one of their regular coaching sessions. In intelligence work, the difference between success and failure often comes down to who speaks up first with critical information. The breakthrough came during a simulated crisis exercise designed to test the entire team's capabilities. The scenario involved a hostage situation at an international conference, with communications being conducted in multiple languages simultaneously. Sarah was assigned to monitor all linguistic channels and provide real-time analysis of the developing situation. As the exercise progressed, Sarah noticed subtle inconsistencies in the communications that suggested the crisis scenario was more complex than initially apparent. The hostage takers were using coded language in Arabic that indicated coordination with external groups. Their Spanish communications revealed internal disagreements about strategy. Most critically, their German conversations suggested the entire operation was a diversion for a larger planned attack. For several minutes, Sarah wrestled with her habitual reluctance to interrupt superior officers with her observations. The exercise was being conducted at the highest levels, with senior commanders making decisions based on incomplete information. Her natural instinct was to wait for someone to ask her opinion rather than volunteering analysis that might be wrong. But Lieutenant Walsh's coaching echoed in her mind, along with her grandmother's words about using her gifts to build bridges and help people understand each other. This wasn't about personal comfort anymore, it was about preventing a catastrophic misunderstanding of a dangerous situation. "Sir," Sarah's voice cut through the strategic discussion with uncharacteristic force. "I need to report critical intelligence from the linguistic analysis." The command center fell silent as Sarah presented her findings with a clarity and confidence that surprised everyone, including herself. She methodically explained the coded communications, the internal disagreements among the perpetrators, and, most importantly, the evidence suggesting the hostage situation was designed to distract attention from a larger planned attack. The exercise coordinator, Brigadier General Harrison, listened intently as Sarah detailed her analysis. When she finished, he looked around the room at the senior officers who had been developing response strategies based on incomplete understanding of the situation. "Ladies and gentlemen, Private Chen's analysis has just prevented us from walking into a trap. If this had been a real situation, our response would have played directly into the perpetrator's hands. We would have concentrated our resources on the hostage rescue while leaving our primary installation vulnerable to the real attack." The implications of Sarah's intervention resonated throughout the command structure. Her ability to synthesize information from multiple linguistic sources had provided situational awareness that no single analyst could have achieved. More importantly, her willingness to speak up decisively had demonstrated growth that exceeded everyone's expectations. Following the exercise, Sarah found herself at the center of discussions about restructuring the intelligence division's operational procedures. General Harrison initiated a comprehensive review of how linguistic intelligence was gathered and analyzed, with Sarah's capabilities serving as the model for future development. But the most significant change was in Sarah herself. The successful intervention had shattered her self-imposed limitations about her role and value within the military structure. She began to understand that her quiet observation style, combined with her linguistic abilities, could be transformed into a powerful intelligence asset when properly applied. Colonel Martinez recognized the transformation and decided to accelerate Sarah's development through increasingly challenging assignments. Rather than continuing with simulations, she arranged for Sarah to provide real-time support for actual diplomatic and intelligence operations. The first real-world assignment came sooner than anyone expected. A trade delegation from multiple European countries was visiting a sensitive military installation to discuss cooperative defense agreements. The negotiations were being conducted in English, but intelligence intercepts suggested that several delegation members were having private conversations that might indicate hidden agendas or security concerns. Sarah was assigned to monitor these private conversations discreetly and provide analysis of any intelligence value. The assignment required her to work independently, make real-time judgments about the significance of various communications, and report findings that could influence high-level policy decisions. The morning of the delegation's arrival, Sarah positioned herself in the communications center with equipment that allowed her to monitor various conversation channels simultaneously. As the day progressed, she tracked discussions in German, French, Spanish, and Italian, building a comprehensive picture of the delegation's true priorities and concerns. What she discovered was both reassuring and troubling. The European officials were genuinely interested in strengthening defense cooperation, but they harbored significant concerns about American intelligence sharing practices and data security protocols. Their private conversations revealed specific technical questions and security requirements that weren't being addressed in the formal negotiations. Rather than reporting these concerns as potential security threats, Sarah recognized them as opportunities for addressing legitimate issues that could strengthen the eventual agreements. Her analysis suggested that the Americans could resolve most concerns by providing additional technical briefings and security guarantees. When Sarah presented her findings to Colonel Martinez, the colonel was impressed not only by the quality of the intelligence but by Sarah's sophisticated understanding of the diplomatic implications. Sarah had moved beyond simple translation to provide strategic analysis that could improve international relationships. Private Chen, your work today probably saved months of difficult negotiations. By identifying these concerns early, we can address them proactively rather than having them surface as objections later in the process. The successful completion of her first real assignment marked Sarah's full transformation from overlooked recruit to valued intelligence asset. But, more importantly, it established her unique approach to intelligence work, which emphasized understanding and bridge building rather than confrontation and suspicion. Colonel Martinez began developing plans for Sarah's next assignment, one that would test her abilities on an international stage and establish her reputation within the broader intelligence community. What neither of them anticipated was how quickly Sarah's growing reputation would attract attention from the highest levels of military leadership, setting the stage for opportunities that would challenge everything they thought they knew about career progression and professional recognition. Sarah's quiet confidence had become quiet competence, and her transformation was about to accelerate in ways that would surprise everyone involved, including Sarah herself. The shy recruit who had once hidden her abilities was becoming someone who could shape international relations through her unique combination of linguistic skill and cultural understanding. 6 months into her specialized assignment, Sarah received a summons that would test everything she had learned and push her capabilities to their absolute limits. The call came directly from the Pentagon, requesting her immediate deployment to a multinational crisis management center in Brussels. An international incident involving 7 countries was escalating rapidly, and traditional diplomatic channels had broken down due to a cascade of miscommunications and cultural misunderstandings. The situation had begun 3 weeks earlier when a routine maritime patrol in disputed waters had resulted in an accidental collision between vessels from 2 allied nations. What should have been a simple matter of insurance claims and repair costs had spiraled into a complex international crisis involving historical grievances, territorial disputes, and wounded national pride. Each country involved was communicating through its own diplomatic channels, using formal language that obscured rather than clarified their actual positions. Translation errors had compounded misunderstandings, while cultural nuances were being lost in the formal diplomatic process. Most critically, back-channel communications between military officials were being conducted in multiple languages, creating a patchwork of information that no single analyst could fully comprehend. Colonel Martinez delivered the briefing personally, emphasizing the unprecedented nature of the assignment. Sarah would be the only American representative in a multinational communications center, responsible for providing real-time linguistic and cultural analysis to military commanders from 7 different countries. Private Chen, the colonel explained, this assignment is unlike anything we've ever attempted. You'll be working independently, making decisions that could affect international relations, and representing American interests in a high-pressure environment where every word matters. The weight of responsibility was staggering, but Sarah had grown into her role sufficiently to recognize the opportunity rather than just the pressure. Her months of training and real-world experience had prepared her for exactly this kind of complex, multilingual situation. The flight to Brussels gave Sarah time to study the crisis background and develop strategies for managing the linguistic challenges ahead. She reviewed recent communications between all parties, identifying recurring themes and underlying concerns that weren't being adequately addressed through normal diplomatic channels. Her analysis revealed that the core issue wasn't the maritime incident itself, but rather deeper concerns about changing military cooperation agreements and shifting alliance structures. The collision had become a symbol of larger anxieties about international relationships and military coordination that had been building for months. Upon arrival in Brussels, Sarah found herself in the most sophisticated international communications center she had ever seen. Representatives from Germany, France, Spain, Italy, Portugal, Belgium, and the Netherlands were working alongside American military liaisons to coordinate response to the crisis. The center buzzed with activity as multiple conversations were conducted simultaneously in at least 6 different languages. General Patricia Kellerman, the American mission commander, briefed Sarah on her specific responsibilities. Private Chen, your job is to monitor all communications channels and provide analysis of anything that might help us understand what these countries really want versus what they're saying publicly. We need to know if there are opportunities for compromise that aren't being recognized through normal diplomatic channels. Sarah's initial observation period revealed the extent to which language barriers were complicating resolution efforts. Each country's representatives spoke English competently in formal settings, but their private conversations and informal discussions were conducted in their native languages. These communications often contained the most honest assessments of their positions and genuine concerns. Her first significant contribution came within hours of her arrival. While monitoring German and French communications, Sarah detected a potential breakthrough that everyone else had missed. The German representatives were expressing private willingness to compromise on territorial patrol boundaries, while the French were simultaneously indicating flexibility on joint training exercise scheduling. Neither side was communicating these positions clearly to the other because of concerns about appearing weak or overeager. Sarah requested a private meeting with General Kellerman to present her analysis. "Ma'am, I believe there's an opportunity for significant progress that isn't being recognized because of communication barriers between the German and French teams." Her detailed explanation of the parallel compromises being discussed privately convinced General Kellerman to facilitate an informal meeting between key German and French representatives. Sarah provided real-time translation and cultural interpretation during this session, helping each side understand not just the words but the underlying intentions and concerns. The breakthrough led to the first substantive progress in weeks of stalled negotiations. More importantly, it established Sarah's credibility within the international community and demonstrated the value of sophisticated linguistic analysis in crisis resolution. Over the following days, Sarah's role expanded as military commanders from other countries began requesting her assistance with their own communication challenges. Her ability to understand cultural context behind formal diplomatic language proved invaluable in identifying opportunities for progress that weren't apparent to participants focused on their own national perspectives. The most critical moment came when intercepts revealed that 2 of the smaller countries were considering withdrawing from the alliance structure entirely if the current crisis couldn't be resolved satisfactorily. Their private communications indicated that they viewed the maritime incident as evidence that the larger alliance members didn't respect their sovereignty and territorial rights. Sarah's analysis of these communications revealed specific concerns that could be addressed through relatively minor adjustments to existing agreements. The smaller countries weren't seeking major concessions, but rather assurances that their voices would be heard and their interests protected in future cooperative ventures. Working directly with General Kellerman, Sarah developed a comprehensive briefing that outlined each country's primary concerns and suggested specific language modifications that could address multiple issues simultaneously. Her recommendations went beyond simple translation to provide strategic guidance on how to frame compromises in ways that allowed each country to claim victory with their domestic audiences. The implementation of Sarah's recommendations required delicate diplomatic maneuvering, but her linguistic insights provided the foundation for successful negotiations. Within a week, agreements were reached that not only resolved the immediate crisis but actually strengthened the overall alliance structure by addressing underlying concerns that had been festering for months. The success of the Brussels mission established Sarah's reputation within the international military intelligence community. Requests began arriving for her participation in other multinational efforts, and her unique combination of linguistic ability and cultural sensitivity became a model for developing similar capabilities in other military organizations. But, perhaps the most significant recognition came from an unexpected source. The European commanders who had worked with Sarah during the crisis jointly submitted a commendation that praised not only her technical capabilities but her diplomatic skill and cultural insight. The document specifically noted her ability to understand and communicate the human elements behind formal negotiating positions. General Kellerman's final assessment was equally impressive. Private Chen's contribution to this mission was absolutely critical to our success. Her ability to understand what people really mean, not just what they say, prevented a potential alliance crisis and actually strengthened international cooperation. This is exactly the kind of capability the military needs to develop for future challenges. As Sarah prepared to return to Fort Brennan, she reflected on how dramatically her life had changed in less than a year. The quiet recruit who had once hidden her abilities was now being sought after for some of the most sensitive and important missions in the international community. But the most profound change was in her understanding of her own purpose and potential. She had discovered that her natural inclination to listen carefully and understand different perspectives wasn't a limitation to be overcome but a strength to be developed and deployed strategically. Colonel Martinez met Sarah upon her return with news that would again reshape her trajectory. The success of the Brussels mission had attracted attention at the highest levels of military leadership, and opportunities were being discussed that would place Sarah at the center of the military's evolving approach to international cooperation and conflict resolution. The quiet rookie who had once seemed destined for an unremarkable military career was about to become a central figure in reshaping how the American military engaged with international partners and managed complex global challenges. 1 year after the quiet private had first demonstrated her extraordinary abilities, Sarah Chen stood in the Pentagon briefing room facing the Joint Chiefs of Staff. The transformation was remarkable not just in her professional accomplishments, but in her presence and confidence. The woman who had once spoken in whispers now commanded attention through the sheer force of her expertise and proven track record. General Marcus Thompson, chairman of the Joint Chiefs, opened the meeting by outlining the strategic challenges facing American military operations in an increasingly complex global environment. Recent international incidents had highlighted critical gaps in cultural understanding and communication capabilities that traditional military training had failed to address. Ladies and gentlemen, General Thompson announced, we're here today to discuss a fundamental reimagining of how the American military approaches international cooperation and conflict resolution. The success of recent operations has demonstrated that our greatest strategic advantages may lie not in traditional military capabilities, but in our ability to understand and communicate effectively across cultural boundaries. Sarah's role in this transformation had become central to military strategic planning. Her success in Brussels had been followed by a series of increasingly complex assignments that had established her as the military's premier specialist in multilingual intelligence analysis and international crisis mediation. The past 6 months had seen Sarah deployed to 3 different continents, providing critical support for operations ranging from humanitarian assistance coordination to complex multinational training exercises. Each assignment had added new dimensions to her capabilities and reinforced her value to military leadership. Colonel Martinez, who had been promoted to brigadier general partly based on her recognition and development of Sarah's talents, presented the comprehensive review of Sarah's contributions to military operations. The statistics were impressive: 7 successful international missions, 3 crisis resolutions that had prevented potential military conflicts, and the development of new protocols for multilingual intelligence analysis that were being adopted throughout the military. But the numbers only told part of the story. Sarah's unique approach to military intelligence had fundamentally changed how the American military engaged with international partners. Instead of relying primarily on formal diplomatic channels, military commanders now had access to real-time cultural and linguistic analysis that revealed the human dimensions behind official positions. Sergeant Chen, General Thompson addressed Sarah directly, using the rank she had recently been promoted to in recognition of her extraordinary service. Your work has not only solved immediate problems but has shown us new ways of thinking about international military cooperation. I'd like you to share your perspective on how we can institutionalize these capabilities. Sarah's response demonstrated how completely she had grown into her role as a strategic advisor. Gone was the hesitant whisper of her early military service, replaced by confident analysis backed by extensive field experience and deep understanding of international military culture. Sir, my experience has shown that most international military conflicts stem from misunderstandings rather than fundamental disagreements. When military leaders from different countries can understand not just what their counterparts are saying, but what they mean culturally and strategically, most disputes become manageable through dialogue rather than confrontation. She proceeded to outline a comprehensive program for developing similar capabilities throughout the military. Her recommendations included specialized language training that emphasized cultural context rather than simple vocabulary, immersion programs that would expose military personnel to international perspectives, and the creation of rapid response teams capable of providing real-time cultural and linguistic analysis during crisis situations. The most innovative aspect of Sarah's proposal was the recognition that effective international military cooperation required understanding emotional and cultural dimensions that traditional military training ignored. Her success had demonstrated that technical competence needed to be combined with empathy and cultural sensitivity to achieve optimal results. General Thompson's response revealed the extent to which Sarah's work had influenced military thinking at the highest levels. Sergeant Chen, the Joint Chiefs have been discussing exactly these issues for months. Your field experience has provided the practical foundation for strategic changes we've been considering. We want to offer you an opportunity to lead the implementation of these new capabilities. The offer was unprecedented. Sarah would be given responsibility for developing and directing a new division focused on international military cooperation and cultural intelligence. The position would involve creating training programs, establishing operational protocols, and serving as senior advisor for complex international military situations. The rank advancement that would accompany this responsibility was equally remarkable. Sarah would be promoted to captain, an extraordinary acceleration that reflected both her proven capabilities and the critical importance of her specialized skills to military strategic planning. But, perhaps most significantly, the position would represent a fundamental recognition that military success in the modern world required capabilities that went far beyond traditional combat readiness. Sarah's work had proven that understanding people and cultures could be more strategically valuable than understanding weapons and tactics. As Sarah considered the offer, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. Less than 2 years earlier, she had been an overlooked recruit who hid her abilities to avoid attention. Now she was being offered the opportunity to reshape military education and operations on a global scale. The decision was complicated by her continued preference for behind-the-scenes work over high-profile leadership roles. The position being offered would place her at the center of military strategic planning and require her to represent American military interests in international forums. But her grandmother's words about using gifts to build bridges between people echoed in her mind, along with the realization that declining this opportunity would waste the platform she had earned through her proven success. The military was offering her the chance to institutionalize the kind of understanding and cooperation that could prevent conflicts and strengthen international relationships. Sir, Sarah responded after careful consideration, I accept the position with the understanding that success will require changing fundamental assumptions about military training and operations. This isn't just about adding language programs or cultural awareness courses. It's about recognizing that the human dimensions of military service are as strategically important as technical capabilities. General Thompson's smile reflected his confidence that Sarah would bring the same innovative thinking to her new responsibilities that had characterized her field operations. Captain Chen, we're counting on exactly that kind of fundamental reconsideration. The military of the future will require leaders who can navigate complexity and ambiguity while building relationships that serve American strategic interests. The formal ceremony that followed represented more than Sarah's promotion and recognition. It symbolized the military's commitment to evolving beyond traditional approaches to international engagement and embracing new models of leadership that emphasized understanding over dominance. As Sarah accepted her new rank and responsibilities, she understood that her personal transformation was complete, but her professional journey was just beginning. The quiet recruit who had once hidden her abilities had become Captain Sarah Chen, Director of International Military Cooperation and Cultural Intelligence, responsible for preparing the American military for challenges that would require all of her linguistic abilities, cultural insights, and hard-won confidence. The woman who had once spoken in whispers was now positioned to help the most powerful military in the world learn to listen more carefully and communicate more effectively. Sometimes the most profound changes begin with the quietest voices, and sometimes those quiet voices are exactly what the world needs to hear. Colonel Martinez, watching the ceremony from the audience, reflected on the lesson that Sarah's story represented for military leadership. The greatest talents don't always announce themselves loudly, and the most valuable capabilities may be hiding in plain sight, waiting for someone wise enough to recognize their potential and patient enough to help them develop. Sarah's transformation from overlooked recruit to strategic leader demonstrated that excellence often comes in unexpected packages, and that the military's future success would depend on its ability to identify and develop human potential in all its diverse forms. The quiet rookie's extraordinary journey was complete, but her most important contributions to military service and international cooperation were yet to come.